to close this up. It's reserved till 10. SAO has it with us that you have until 9:30.
The one-state solution versus the two-state solution, and I'm thinking, I completely understand your logic, and I want to have my own for myself, but I'm thinking if the settlements will be evacuated and complete justice in terms of having my home will be made for the Palestinians, why not to have one shared space for all of us? We can live happily ever after.
Well, you're talking about millions of people, so it's very difficult, I think, to generalize about their motives. For a significant proportion of refugees, particularly, let's say, the first generation, it is a real longing to return home, even today, 60 years later, even to an idealized space that no longer exists. And I think you will find that longing has also been passed down through the generations. And that longing, I think, is also dependent on whatever, let's say, material or civil circumstances of a specific individual or family or community is. But having said that, I think the one common thread among all Palestinians, not just Palestinian refugees, but the Palestinian people as a whole, because I think, just to backtrack, I think it's important to understand that the Palestinian refugee question is not seen as a question that concerns Palestinian refugees as much as it is seen as the central national question of the Palestinian people in their entirety. It's, I think, the ultimate, the defining, the existential national question for the Palestinian people in their entirety. In that sense, it is first and foremost a question of justice, and what Nora has referred to terrorism. I think it's on that basis that I emphasize the issue of recognition of the rights, recognition of the injustice that has been perpetrated, and that is the key that unlocks the door to the possibility of a mutually acceptable negotiated solution. Now, regarding what we said about the one-state solution, I would have to again agree with Norm. I mean, if you want to have a moral discussion, if you want to talk about what is preferable and more just, etc., then yes, of course, it's quite easy to construct the case for a one-state solution, whether a secular democratic state or a binational entity or whatever. But I think, again, citing my neighbor here, politics is very much related to dealing with established and accepted outcomes and norms and so on. And whether one likes it or not, we do live in a world where a two-state settlement, again, you know, not the kind of mongrel version of it that was proposed by Oslo, but the type of outcome that we've been discussing this evening is the more or less universally accepted solution. Having said that, I think it also is interesting to perhaps think through what new possibilities a two-state settlement might open for future scenarios, and that's something else that might be interesting to look at.
Huge.
Actually, a slight disagreement.
Maybe you can stand up because...
I tend to agree with you that what's necessary as far as reaching a settlement and also a solution, if you want to use the wider term, is that they have to recognize, of course, what happens to the displacement of the indigenous people. Where I do disagree with you, and I base this on many conversations I've had with Palestinians long before I is that they feel that it has to come from Israel. I've spoken to many of them, and they literally just want a reasonable offer, and they don't care if it comes from Denmark or wherever. And I think there's a reason to that. It's because the Western countries have been complicit in helping this be able to happen without their cooperation, whether it's the French providing their mystery jets or the United States providing all sorts of weapons today. So these other countries, they bear a great deal of responsibility and culpability in the crimes of Israel. I'm not trying to say that Israel was innocent, they don't as well, but that's where I disagree with you. And I've spoken to many Palestinians, and they don't really care, a lot of them, where the money would come from. But I do agree with you that they have to, in the end, if you're going to have a peaceful settlement or solution, they're going to have to come to the understanding that these were displaced indigenous peoples. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if, again, just maybe repeating myself a little, but I think if you're striving for a negotiated settlement of the river, I don't think there is a negotiated solution. If you're striving for a negotiated settlement of the refugee question, then Israel's recognition of rights and admission of responsibility is absolutely essential to making that possible. And the reason I spoke about Israel playing a lead and direct role in any compensation scheme is precisely to avoid a situation in which Israel is seen to be somehow shoving off responsibility to some kind of international consortium or whatever. And it's precisely to make an absolute water, airtight, ironclad reality where there can be absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind that whatever negotiated solution may emerge has been achieved on the basis of Israeli recognition of that right and admission of responsibility.
Questions for Dr. Finkelstein?
First off, I have an agreement, I have a correction, and I have a question. First off, the agreement. Mr. Finkelstein, you are right. Palestinians are very decent people. I was over there this summer, both sides, Israel and West Bank. Fabulous people, all sides. So, I love the Palestinian people. Mr. Neighbor was one. Yeah. All right. Quick correction was that you said there were, in the last 72 hours of the Lebanon war, there were over 4 million cluster bombs.
Between 3.8 and 4.6 million.
All right. I actually Googled while you were, after you said that, and you were off by about threefold. It was 1.2 million.
No, young man, one of the problems when people Google is, they think everything on the web is true. There are many things on the web. Allow me to finish. The Israelis used a figure of 1.2 million cluster bomblets that they dropped in the last 72 hours. Go read the report of Human Rights Watch. It did a very detailed report on what happened. The figure is between 3.8 and 4.6 million, so I average it out at 4 million cluster bomblets. Everything the Israelis say is not necessarily true. That's the figure they gave. But, for argument's sake, let's say it is true. Was the last 72 hours of the war. A ceasefire resolution had already been reached. It was on the point of being implemented. Why did they drop 1 million cluster bomblets in the last 72 hours? Let's use your only 1 million.
I wasn't going to say that it was right. I was going to say it's the difference between the audience you have here and the audience filling out the course.
Excuse me?
I was saying that it's the difference between the size of the audience we have here and imagine 4 times that, 3 times that, be filling up this room. So I'm saying it's that difference.
The audience could decide for itself whether it's significant. I won't impose my opinion.
Okay.
But I will impose it on the factual issue. On the factual issue, you're mistaken.
Can I ask a question? Thank you. So, as we've established, you're Jewish, I'm Jewish, 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
We never established that. But
Okay,
go ahead.
well, I was going to establish that 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Okay. So, you said the quote was that you ended with "Be decent and be fair." So, being decent and being fair, how do you reconcile that with calling the settlers of Hebron, not Hebron, crazy-eyed, like combination of Stepford wives and invasion?
Well, because any population has a crazed element within it. And I think many Israelis will tell you that the settlers, or some of them, are crazy. Now, that's not a particularly egregious statement to make. There are crazy Indians, there are crazy Chinese, there are crazy Catholics, and there are some crazy Jews. And they happen to be concentrated in Hebron. Why is that an unfair statement? I've met them, and I'll tell you the truth. They scare me. They're kind of freaky.
Are there crazy Palestinians?
Yeah, there are crazy Palestinians. That's for sure. Are they also in? No, actually, first of all, it's not even Hebron or Hebron. It's Al Khalil. So we want to get technical about it. And honestly, well, 2 things, honestly. Number one, I'm long past the age where I want to get into a kind of intellectual battle where I prevail. I do care about facts, and I reacted sharply on the factual issue. But personally, and I mean it not to flatter you, I'm prone to flattery, I respect the fact you stayed, you listened, you know the audience is overwhelmingly not supportive of your point of view. You stood, you asked a question, and you were very respectful. And I'm respectful, I'm glad about that. And I think if you stayed and you listened and you're respectful, I think we can reach each other. I do, because I'm not the enemy. Unless you think solving the conflict on basic principles of international law somehow turns me into an enemy. But if we can both agree the conflict should be resolved on basic principles of international law, I'm not your enemy. I'm not. I think there's room for you. In fact, I think there's ample room for you at the rendezvous of victory. Just be fair. That's it. Now, you, I'm a little tired now, so you said at the very end, what was the point you made? I wanted to just respond to it.
I just wanted to ask how that's reconciled with calling these people crazy.
Well, you know, I was cautious. I said at one point, if I can use the word crazy. I know it sometimes, I've said it in the past, and people get offended by it, but they are crazed. You know, and we have to accept that fact. There's an element there that's ideologically crazed. And you would not, for example, recoil in horror were I to say that there was an element among the German population that was crazed. Actually, most Jews think all of the German population was crazed. And they don't consider it racist to say that. In fact, people write best-selling books, one from Harvard, which said all of Germans were homicidal murderers. They were crazy. That's what he said. That's actually, literally, Daniel Goldhagen said they were crazy. And nobody finds that illegitimate. But if you say there are 400 crazy settlers in Hebron, somehow that becomes unreasonable and unfair. I think it's an accurate characterization of them. I'll also add one thing else. I think they're cowards. And I'll add a third thing. I think it's good that they're cowards, because that means when push comes to shove, they'll leave. And finally, we can agree on this. You can call it Hebron, you can call it Hebron, you can call it whatever you want. But one thing you can't call it. You can't call it yours. It is not your city. It's occupied Palestinian territory. That's the law.
Behind that.
I appreciate the map you made up there, and the one where can I call it the best case scenario, the one where 62% of them are given back. I've read a lot of data, and I think there's whispers about it in Israeli media every few months, that if the order to evacuate even 38% of those settlements was given, there are significant portions of the army in Israel that would refuse the order. And I think if you can allow your imagination, Dr. Finkelstein, to project what that might be like, or to conjecture, if you had some soldiers forcing Jews, and they're being resistance, violent resistance, and it's easy for me to imagine settlers violently resisting being evacuated. You would have maybe a civil war, but I don't think that that is a political possibility. And I think the onus is on you, as someone who is advocating for a two-state solution, to put pressure on the army to weed out these crazy elements. And I think that's a fair word. I don't think that you're asking people too much when you call them crazy, but where are you coming? I mean, is that enough of a question?
Well, I understand your question, and I also listened closely to Mouin's own remarks, in which at one point he alluded to the fact that there may not be an army ready to execute the order, which is to say that Israel has moved significantly in the rightward direction, and obviously the rightward movement of Israel is reflected in its citizen army, and that's a problem. And you can't predict with those things. But what you can say is that I remember many years ago when I went to the occupied territories and I met an activist in the Israeli, what was called then the peace camp. And she said, you would be very surprised how quickly Israelis will will do the right thing when they realize that their bread is no longer being buttered. And that's just another way of saying, as you correctly put it, the problem with the settlements is not a physical problem, it's a political problem. And during the negotiations, which I read through this past summer, the Israelis were very clear. They never said we can't physically evacuate the settlements. They said politically we can't do it. And then that's our job. Our job is to exert enough pressure on Israel that the population realizes we better evacuate them because the pressure is becoming unbearable. That's our job. I'm done. Maybe one last question for Mouin, because he's going to take off for the Middle East and I won't get to hear him again. Okay. So go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank both of you for this amazing talk. And I have more of a concern than actually a question. And this is the analogy that you gave, Dr. Finkelstein, about the homeless that live on your block, which you thought are asking too much if they actually ask to get a room in your house. They should just accept getting a jacket. And I have a concern with that because you're kind of reducing the Palestinian issue to an issue of as if they're asking too much, when in fact the room that is in your house is actually theirs. So it's not a matter of whether you're going to do much by saying whether I should give them the room or not. It's actually their right. this is their room. There are people, Palestinian refugees, who actually have keys to their homes in Palestine. You cannot tell them except a jacket instead of getting into their homes. And this is very apparent, I think, in the refugee problem that is really
Well, you very cleverly turned the tables on me with the analogy, so I have to give credit where credit's due. But I think you missed the point I was trying to make. I didn't say that they should get the coat instead of the room because it was right. I said, actually, I think it's right that they get the room. I said, that's how much public opinion can accept. And then if you ask, your goal goes beyond that, you lose the public and you create a cult. And if you look at, as I said, the gamut of representative opinion and respected opinion, remember, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion to which I referred from 2004, it starts from the premise that Israel is occupying Palestinian territories, West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. It doesn't start from the premise that Israel is occupying territories, an occupied territory. Israel is a state occupying Palestinian territories. Every resolution in the UN General Assembly, if you read it, it begins with what? Every resolution begins with the partition resolution and then builds on the 47. That's their point of departure. The point of departure is 2 states. I never rendered a judgment on whether or not it was fair, but I don't see how you can reach a public when you don't have any substantive opinion or precedent on your side. You can't win. You go to a public, you say, enforce the law. They understand that. Do you win the public by saying eliminate Israel, whether non-violently, violently, peacefully? Do you win a public with that? I don't see it. It's true what Mouin said, and I seconded it. Israel's opinion has crashed. Public opinion of Israel has crashed. But it has not crashed to the point of talking about eliminating Israel, leaving aside any moral issue. No, it's not reached that point. There's nothing out there that leads me to believe there's a public prepared for that, leaving aside the ethical issue, that's prepared to hear that slogan. It's a cult slogan.
Okay, thank you all for coming. Just wanted to let you know that SJP meets regularly every Tuesday, CAS 223 at 8 p.m. Thank you.